Can you trust Drake London in your week 2 lineup? That and more this week on the couch. We bring back the big guns. Only the best Bob Harris to calm us down, get us on track for week 2, starting with Drake London. Oh, man. Do we go back for more in week 2?
Oh, of course you can. But cautiously, proceed with caution. So it's interesting. By the way, hi Sigmund. It's so nice to see you.
Hi. It's great to see you.
So you talk about the calmness of week 1. I heard something on Monday that really struck me and hit hard and totally is just the perfect thing. And it's just a short thing. Peter Schrager on Good Morning Football just came out and said it. Week 1 is a liar. It's a big fat liar. It's going to tell you things that are totally not true, and you're going to believe them, and you're going to react to them in ways that you probably should not react. You're going to overreact for sure to things you don't need to overreact to. So we'll help ease that up a little bit. That said, Drake London. No, we've been told all along, Arthur Smith is an offensive genius, right? And we've seen signs of this, his ability to twist up the talents of Cordero Patterson, Rubik's Cube style, into something serviceable when other coaches have failed. We've seen it, going back to Tennessee. But what is his genius? Maybe his genius is understanding what his team does best and what his team's weaknesses are. And maybe his team's weakness at this point is quarterback, right? We don't know if that's a permanent condition, but it seems to be the condition right now. So I'm hoping for more. I think Drake London playing him as a wide receiver 3 level and hoping he can return a little value is reasonable. But if you have some guys that are, like if you got Puka Nacua on your roster, I'm probably it's a tough matchup, right? I mean, maybe the Rams aren't the best, the best example this week, but there are players that are rising up that you're going to have to make some hard decisions on. And, the fantasy expert mindset is play your studs. Well, we don't know who our studs are. It's too early to know. We know who we drafted them to be, but they have to come through on their end. And that week 1 performance, just in general from the Falcons offense, was not encouraging in terms of the passing game. And I think they're going to focus on the run, expecting that to go forward seems like a reasonable expectation. That said, that the minimal targets seem like that was way on the low side. I'm expecting a little more meat on the bone, but you're gonna have some tough decisions for him at wide receiver 3.
Yeah, it is tough because, like you said, Bob, week 1 is a liar. Week 1 could be a liar for a lot of different reasons. I think first and foremost, just the shortened preseason and teams not exposing their players to injury more often in the preseason means there just is time to knock the rust off. There's also the matchups, and sort of a subset of that is the game scripts. And in Atlanta's case, they got the ideal game script. And like you said, I mean, Arthur Smith, even last year when Arthur Smith was barely passing, well, if you had Marcus Mariota, you would not call very many passes. But Drake London still overcame and was relevant in fantasy leagues. And we thought, well, with Desmond Ridder fully prepared to lead this offense and Drake London, hey, at least Desmond Ridder passed about 5 times a game more than Marcus Mariota. But I think that Arthur Smith would be just fine, and Falcons fans should too, with 18 pass attempts and mostly short, safe pass attempts. And enter stage left Bijan Robinson with 6 catches. And now what there is left in that passing game pie, which was small to begin with, gets smaller. We hope, I guess, from a fantasy perspective, that Green Bay gives them a tougher game and forces them out of their shell. But another reason that week 1's a liar is because of matchups.
Right.
And Green Bay's that's a tough team. Green Bay's a tough defense. Now, let's go to another player that we hoped, lots of buzz in the offseason. And so on one hand, we don't like what happened with Drake London because everything went the way the Falcons wanted it to go. And wow, if that happens more often, that's going to be bad. We don't like DJ Moore because everything went exactly the opposite of what the Bears wanted, right?
Coverages went his way and other people got open and took advantage of it. And so did Justin Fields. So,
but here's the thing, right?
It's a lie.
It's a lie, right? Is it a lie? Because we saw Tampa Bay's defense, the good old Tampa Bay's defense, don't try to run on them. Just throw downfield. Just try to exploit their secondary when you're not taking quarterback hits, Kirk Cousins. But even if we say that's a rational game plan for this week, and obviously DJ Moore already looks frustrated. I mean, you have to do something. I mean, he was the centerpiece of that trade, trading out of the number 1 pick. Rational coaching would dictate that, hey, against Tampa Bay, this is a get-right game for DJ Moore. He knows the secondary well. But you wonder, are the Bears just so incompetent that even if they intend to make it better, it won't get better? DJ Moore, less worried, more worried, the same worried as Drake London?
So this is an interesting one. By the way, Matt Eberflus said today that maybe they deactivate Chase Claypool this week and go with Equanimeous St. Brown. Good for them. But that they're in that position tells a little something. I was talking earlier this week about we drafted Justin Fields, following a magical season, at least run wise, right? But we drafted him thinking there was going to be improvement as a passer, right? And maybe some high percentage of what he did as a runner. He looked good running the football. That's the plus. The passing, I think, is still a work in progress, but I don't know if it's as much him or as it is the scheme. I mean, right. I'm putting some of this on the coach's shoulders. Sorry, coaches. But I do think, sometimes when we get in these situations where we see a really horrible game or just the low end of the range of possible outcomes, which we got from DJ Moore, we maybe fall back a little bit on a player's history. And we look at what DJ Moore has done over the course of his time in Carolina with a series of not great quarterbacks. I give him a quarterback proof card. I don't know that he needs it now, but he's a very good receiver, right? And so I'm going to hope that wins out. But again, this is the thing about September, and you kind of set it up nicely, is the volatility is there. And, the age-old advice is play your studs. I don't know if that's the best advice anymore. I think playing looking at the matchups and playing what's in front of you, and then, as your studs come in, as your studs validate that they are studs as you head closer to October, by all means. But in the meantime, when you see an opportunity or an opportunistic player or scheme or matchup, I mean, I don't see that there's I don't think it's malpractice to tell people to go ahead and dial back and follow their feelings on these things this month, because it all seems very, very volatile.
Yeah, volatility. And then the note I've been hitting a lot, Bob, is then recontextualize.
Yes.
It's what we just saw, what we thought it meant might change based on what we see this week in different matchups, maybe with different players on the field. I mean, so here's another one that's kind of a column A or column B, right? Like column A is we got way too ahead of ourselves on the Baltimore offense. Lamar Jackson still's a little sloppy, lack of downfield passing. Now J.K. Dobbins, the key to the running game, he's out for the year. Even what Zay Flowers did was manufactured in a way that, but I don't know if you can trust that. Column B is, hey, put Mark Andrews out there, let Lamar just get up to cruising altitude, and you'll see this week against a Cincinnati team that this is a big game for them. 0-2 in the division is not anywhere that they want to start out. Right. So again, with Baltimore, so much anticipation. And we do have a positive note here. There's a lot of layers of this onion to peel back. I mean, the one that's not going to make you cry is Zay Flowers. Although if you feel like, hey, that might not be sticky, because that was just touches by design, manufactured touches. But then you have the introduction, hopefully this week, of Mark Andrews. And then also people are looking at Justice Hill on their waiver wire. They're looking at Gus Edwards on their waiver wire. A lot of different questions, even though this team is coming off of a Scorigami 25-9 win in week 1.
So just to what do we do as fantasy managers? What do we spend our offseason doing? We tell ourselves happy stories about the players we want to draft, and we tell ourselves horrible stories about the players we're not interested in, right? And so sometimes those stories come true and sometimes they don't. What the good fantasy managers, the better fantasy managers, are the ones who are the quickest to divorce from the narratives they've built over the course of the offseason. That's not easy, right? Because we built them. Right. We sat there and we talked ourselves into this is going to be the best damn thing I ever saw.
Yeah.
Right? Like this is Todd Monken. Man, you see what he did at University of Georgia. You see what he did in Tampa. You see what he did in Cleveland. This is the whole plan, is to get Lamar Jackson back to 2019 Lamar Jackson. And so we've, if that's the story you told yourself, it's hard to step back and say, well, there might be a little wider range of outcomes here than I anticipated. And I don't know that you should be ready to jump off it, because the big missing piece, Mark Andrews, is going to make a difference. I mean, when you lose your de facto wide receiver one, ask Kansas City how that works out, right? So I'm not going to be out on this, and I think the happy stories I've told myself about Todd Monken probably are going to come more true than not true by the end of the season, but they're not true yet. And so I don't need to sit here and pretend they are, right? I mean, I can, and I think you said it right. Like, take it week by week this week. be willing to make some adjustments, and then see if the stories you've told yourself are coming true as you head into October. I know this is not what people want to hear, because like, I don't want to be 0-4 in October. I don't either. But there is just for the reasons Sig laid out earlier, you know, the 3 games, nobody playing throughout the course of August, expecting the defenses to come out and look way ahead of the offenses is reasonable. You know, expecting some of them to be as far ahead as they are. I'm looking at you, Dallas, or is it the Giants far behind, or the Steelers that far behind, or was it San Francisco? Cleveland's going to be a way better defense than, you know, I mean, Jim Schwartz is not is not nothing, right? And he's got disruptive playmaking talent at all the levels. So I think they're going to pose people problems. But were any of those offenses as bad as what we saw? You know, I'm not entirely sure. I'm hoping, like, the Giants' offensive line might be, but I'm hoping for more. But I say the same thing about Philadelphia, right? They came out and they had like, you know, not a great day. Well, think about this. Imagine this: you're going up against a team with a coach and Bill Belichick, probably a pretty good coach, even without Tom Brady. In fact, a pretty good defensive mind. He had an entire offseason to sit around and stew and be pissed off that he wasn't in the, you know, had the success he did last year. He goes, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to figure out a plan for Philadelphia today, and I'm going to make it better every damn day until the season starts. Right. And so, you know, maybe expecting the Patriots defense, which has pretty good personnel as well, come out and have a good game and shut somebody down, Dallas Goedert, backfield, whatever you want to say. And it is like a pretty reasonable expectation. So these are the things we're dealing with. I put a lot of thought in this. I feel like I talk to you every year this time, and it's like a focus for me is, how do we get through September? You know, how do we manage September? And you could say I'm taking an approach where I'm just playing my studs. I'm playing the guys I drafted to be my starters as my starters. And I'm not going to fault you. Like, I'm probably doing that probably 80% of the time, right? But I'm also giving myself a little grace and realizing that there's, you know, there are players who rise up and get opportunities, you know, Rams receiving core, or you know, somebody in Indianapolis in that backfield, or maybe I realize, like, wow, Calvin Ridley is going to make a difference in Jacksonville, and it's not going to be great news for Christian Kirk or Evan Engram, or, you know, maybe even Zay Jones. Every week it might be a different guy, or the Chiefs, you know, wide receiving core. We want there to be a wide receiver one. Maybe what happened when the Chiefs told Tyreek Hill to pack a bag, and we're going to pay our quarterback $500 million, and he's going to decide who his wide receiver one is from play to play, is how it's going to be. And you're not going to know. It's not going to be Sky Moore every damn week. It's not going to be the guy you expect it to be. It's going to be the guy who is open every play and willing to catch the football.
Yeah, I think that to really get to the point of heartening for everybody, like you said, I don't want to be 0-4, but if you're 0-3, 0-4, but you've absorbed the right lessons from what the NFL washing over us in September are teaching, then you can be that team that gets into the playoffs at 7-6 and makes a run, because you're skating to where the puck's going to be. But I like how you're saying, hey, always start your studs. Well, we don't know. It isn't that it's wrong. It's that we're not sure who is going to be a stud. And there's both sides of that. One is players that we expected to be studs, that at least in week one, they didn't look like studs. Their situations didn't look like ones to set up stud NFL fantasy seasons. But on the other side, there are some players that, boy, in week one, they did look like they're going to be a stud. And I guess this starts with Puka Nacua, right? And this was one where it's so funny, Bob, because on one hand, and we'll talk about some of this stuff. On one hand, I feel like one of my takeaways from week one is, boy, am I not going to trust preseason momentum, you know, with the Giants offense, the Steelers offense, Dallas Goedert, David Njoku. I could go on and on. There were players that, and it was consistent. The drumbeat was consistent about units, about individual players. But let's talk about Puka Nacua, the biggest waiver wire star of week one. And the answer here was foreshadowed from the beginning in OTAs, in rookie minicamp, and every Rams report said they're putting a lot on his plate, especially for a 5th round rookie.
Yeah.
They look like they're preparing him for a lot. And that was before Cooper Kupp was hurt. You put him in there, and I am definitely more inclined to tell people, err on the side of overspending on him. Err on the side, like you said, of putting him in your lineup over players that you never would have dreamed of even asking the question a week ago. So it sounds like you're very positive despite the San Francisco matchup. And again, if the Rams are reasonably competent against the San Francisco 49ers, then that may, because the Steelers don't play until Monday night, we might say, wow, the Steelers offense really is that bad. Is Puka that good?
Part of this is Matthew Stafford looks like Matthew Stafford. And we can go back historically speaking, and whoever his wide receiver one is has really, really good seasons. And at the moment, that appears to be Puka Nacua. Those 15 targets. I think Scott Barrett had put it out there, right? That's the most targets for a rookie wide receiver in week one ever. Yeah. Since there have been targets in 1992. So it's, it's not worth overlooking. And even if Matthew Stafford doesn't know who any of these kids are, he can see which one's open. Right, if he can't go to the club with them, but he can hit them with a football. And I do think, like, this week's matchup is pretty daunting. But again, I don't like to like we do the same thing with everything, right? Say we sit there and we say, wow, this quarterback situation is great. I'm not drafting Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I'm not drafting Terry McLaurin. I'm not drafting last year. I'm not drafting Tyler Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf or Amari Cooper. And we overblow that just like we do with matchups each week, and I think maybe I'm as guilty of that or more guilty of that than other people, because I sit there and talk on the radio about it for 2 hours every night. And I talk myself into these unmovable positions, over the course of a week. By the end of the week, hell no, I'm not doing anything.
Right.
Right. Like,
well, that's our job. Project certainty, even where there's no rational person would have certainty.
So, but the role, what should we be chasing? Right. I like to use my old man simple logic, right? Like, don't draft last year's best team. Well, okay. That doesn't mean you can't draft some of last year's best players are going to be this year's, but also, like volume. Volume is the wellspring. It is the primordial sludge from which fantasy points emanate, right? If somebody is getting volume, I'm willing to chase that. And Puka Nacua got volume. I don't think it's a mirage. I don't think it's momentary. Week one is a liar, but sometimes the performances are not. And look, we didn't think the Rams were going to fare that well against Seattle. So San Francisco has been the boss of them in the regular season. I want to say, what is it, 8 straight or 9 straight wins? But I do think Matthew Stafford looks sharp, and I think that volume is going to be sticky for Nacua.
Yeah, it's the role, it's the execution, and it's that the team saw it. I mean, they were telling us that.
We heard the beats talk about it. And also, sometimes it's as simple as, like, which of these pieces is different than the others? Right? And he's a little bit of a different piece in terms of his body type and the way he plays. So that interests me too.
Yeah, I see tiny little bit like Hines Ward in him, the way he plays, in so much that it's not the most athletic or graceful style. It just gets the job done. Kind of like Amon-Ra St. Brown. Just get the job done. And he was getting the job done. And definitely, I think that most, if not all, the start-sit questions we get this week about Puka Nacua, we're going to say Puka. But what about his teammate Kyren Williams? And this was another one where I want to say all of these preseason narratives, I'm the mayor of Narrative Street, and I'm going to recall myself. But at the same time, there were preseason narratives about Kyren Williams, maybe not to the extent that he would be the lead back, but certainly they were open to him at least being a committee back. Now, again, we're revising our expectations for the Rams offense a lot, in part a lot to Matthew Stafford and how well Matthew Stafford's playing. So that rising tide lifted that ship of Kyren Williams. And also we have with Puka, it's just a question of how much are you willing to bid on him? Again, we say go a little over that, maybe 5 units over whatever you think the right cost is. What about Kyren? Because there are the Baltimore backs. There's Joshua Kelly. We still don't know about Austin Eckler. Yeah, there's a lot of guys out there. How much do we prioritize Kyren Williams? Do we think this is at least remotely as sticky as what we expect with Puka?
So I was kind of more on board the Kyren a little bit early in the week. I had a lengthy discussion with one Matt Waldman, who pointed out to me there were lots of heavy boxes for Cam Akers. And as I rewatched that game, I saw there was a lot of times where he was getting hit behind the line of scrimmage. It seemed like that him being on the field set the tone for this is a run, right? And I don't know that changes. I thought the workload, the share of the snaps was fine. The results weren't fine. I'm not ready to overpay for Kyren Williams. I think there's clearly going to be a role there. How great it's going to be might depend week to week, and probably not like my expectations again are a little lower this week going against San Francisco. So I'm probably not going to pay premium dollars for him. There are probably other targets I'm more interested in.
Yeah. So go ahead, since we were talking about the running back waiver wire this week. Is there? I mean, we'll talk about Kendrick Bourne. There's Hunter Henry. I mean, there's some names from the Patriots offense. There's not a lot at quarterback, but running back, there are some substantial decisions to make.
Right.
What's your overall view? I mean, is it? And sometimes the right answer is, hey, let everybody else spend.
The one I
wait.
get.
Yeah. the one I actually end up with. Is there a running back that you feel like you said, and it sometimes at waiver wire decisions, it's not getting the most coveted back. Sometimes the right answer, especially in week 2, is the running back, someone maybe like Tyjae Spears, where the stats aren't causing a stampede, but if you watch the player and you look at the usage, there's room for him to grow versus the more immediate gratification guys like Baltimore's running backs, like Kyren Williams, like Josh Kelly. Where are you on this week 2 waiver wire running back crop?
So I do. It's funny. I would just put in some bids on Spears, kind of for that reason. Like he'll be he'll be a cheap piece or cheaper piece than the others. I think people chase. We chase the flashy things.
Mm-hmm.
The touchdowns are what we'll be chasing. So Kyren Williams and Justice Hill are probably going to go a little higher or go a little ahead of where I want them to go. So I may end up with way more Gus Edwards, because of that. And I don't know that that's the wrong answer. I mean, clearly both those guys are going to have some work in this offense, but you go back to the over time. What have I seen? I've seen more from Gus Edwards. They clearly like Justice Hill, and he was in some fortuitous spots this week. Is that going to be the rule? I don't think so. So it's I don't think so. I think it's going to be Edwards, but so Edwards is the one I bid the most on. I think Zach Moss. You feel like he has a shelf life, right?
Right.
Like it seems like the waters are calming on the Jonathan. Time heals all wounds.
You think week 5 he just shows up and it's like nothing happened?
It's entirely possible. We always, when we talk about these negotiations and these situations, the public portions are always the most contentious portions, right? Behind the scenes, it's usually like business, just like getting hammered out, and that's how deals like the day before when people are at each other's throats. The next day they've got the biggest deal ever agreed to, and everything's hunky dory. In this case, I do think that the behind the scenes has been super contentious with Taylor, and thanks for that, Mr. Irsay. But maybe it seems like it's calming down. At least the reporters that are close to the scene think it's calming down. So I feel like Zach Moss has a shelf life, and I don't know that I'm super enthusiastic about him anyway. I'd like to dial back. So it's probably Edwards at the top of the list, and then guys like Spears, I think, and Josh Kelly, who looks like he's going to have a legit role. Like they've been working for how many years to get that Melvin Gordon half of that Gordon, that Eckler Gordon, duo, and they seem to swing and miss. I want to just say that it's, I drafted the hell out of Josh Kelly in dynasty leagues when his rookie season, and I've held on because I don't let go of anyone in dynasty. It's a problem.
Sure.
But it seems like this is coming around, and he's finally. And I remember when Isaiah Spiller was like, wasn't he third on everyone's list last year? What the hell happened to him? But Kelly is a guy I'll be investing into this week.
Yeah, I think that Eckler, the early signs are that he's probably just the signs are that he's not going to play. We'll see. But it could be Kelly's show against Tennessee. Now, it is a much tougher Tennessee run defense. Although Jamal Williams is not exactly the guy you want to use to measure a run defense as far as efficiency. So, again,
but going back to last year.
Right. He's not going to be an efficient runner. He's going to get volume. He's going to get touchdowns. So we'll see a good test for Joshua Kelly either way, and a good test for the Kellen Moore offense, which, again, was a run. Thought, hey, we are out from under the thumb of Joe Lombardi. Now we can get Justin Herbert out there slinging it, but it's a running game-based offense, bringing it over with him from Dallas. But we'll see how if they can adjust. Tennessee's cornerbacks are definitely the soft underbelly of that defense that you want to attack. So we watch this stuff with rational coaching in mind. And like you said, we won some of these games can lie to us. I guess I want to just brighten things up a little bit, Bob, because we talked about some of the happy stories we tell ourselves all off season and that we tell other people so that they follow us, or at the very least they consider it. Give me a happy story you were telling yourself all off season. And after week 1, you could sit back and say, yeah, that's one. I mean, one for me was Rashid Shaheed. I was saying, hey, Rashid Shaheed is a guy that was unbelievably efficient per target last year. Derek Carr is an upgrade as a downfield passer. Michael Thomas, even if he's a factor, who knows how long that is going to last. Rashid Shaheed gives that deep ball threat that Derek Carr can harness. And voila, there's one I can point at. What's a happy story that you can point at that at least for 1 week came true?
So I've been howling all off season long. Like, we don't know enough about Jordan Love to make any strong, fast decisions about him. But the Packers did. Packers let a 4-time MVP kick his way out the door. And I don't care how the relationship is. If you're a responsible organization and you have that player in the building and you don't think you have somebody who can at least, be serviceable standing by, you don't let that guy out the door. I think the Packers have all along known more about Jordan Love than we know, and they liked what they knew, and they were pretty comfortable with it. And I felt like he was a guy I was drafting as my quarterback too in a lot of leagues. I think as somebody with some upside. I think maybe we'll find out that that's going to be that whole notion that the Packers had a pretty good idea of what they had all along. And also doesn't hurt having Matt LaFleur as your coach who look at what he, how he tweaked the scheme without Christian Watson and to maximize the playmaking ability of Aaron Jones and the other pieces around him. So there's a lot to like there. And I thought like the huge concerns that this, that they were, wow, Aaron Rodgers is gone. They don't even know what they have. Yes, they did.
Yeah, I think that there's also, I keep referring back to last year whenever they said in Seattle, well, Geno looks at the wristband. I think for Green Bay,
right,
Jordan Love looks at the wristband. They know that Jordan Love's going to be an extension of the coach.
Yep.
The same way that Brock Purdy is an extension of the coach. And whenever it's such a scheme-based offense, that's going to make a big difference. And I think unlike Lamar Jackson, where we're making excuses and saying, oh, well, Mark Andrews wasn't out there. For Jordan Love, we can say, well, Christian Watson wasn't out there. Romeo Doubs wasn't 100%. What could this offense be with those guys healthy? Of course, Aaron Jones and the hamstring, we're going to watch that. AJ Dillon, not good. And
hoping
we'll
see
more
from him.
Yeah.
But I think another one, Sig, was Tua Tagovailoa, who I started.
Oh, yeah.
So I started moving him up, way up because, I am injury agnostic. I don't care. I don't care if you've been hurt. I care if you are hurt, right? Like Cooper Kupp was my wide receiver 1 going into the summer. And then the first hamstring, I stuck with it. And then the second, I said, boom, he's outside. I bailed on it, right? So, but Tua, I mean, he's not hurt right now. And I get it. And like, there's a layer of concern there with him that he doesn't necessarily have to be hurt to get yanked from a game, right? It just has to look like he's hurt. He can't even look like he's hurt to get yanked out of a game. So there's concerns there. But like, if you look at all the numbers, all the metrics, all the things, like we all made fun of Tyreek Hill for saying Tua throws the prettiest ball I've ever seen. I think I saw evidence of that against the Chargers. Maybe Tyreek Hill is not entirely off the reservation there. So I think that drafting to it, I kind of had been evolving on him, and like I'd been a little bit on Deshaun Watson, and like the exhibition season wasn't as great as I expected. It didn't look like he was coming around, so I kind of moved a little harder on Tua, and I feel like it could totally get the rug pulled out on me because again, being injury agnostic means that you take chances on players. Look, nobody remembers second place, Sig. Right?
No.
Nobody remembers. There's not any belts on my sitting around here in my office from leagues I came in second place on. You win from taking some chances, some calculated risks, and I think taking a risk on a guy like Tua, who put a lot of effort into not putting himself in the same position, right? To his credit, and there's only so much you control, but he did some things that he could try to control, the jiu-jitsu and everything. I mean, falling correctly is a big deal for him because he has not done that well. So there's a lot to like there, and I think a lot to like about the offense. Brock Purdy, once I realized that he was back, once it became apparent, and I think it became apparent like in May that, hey, this guy's going to be ready to go, right? I think, there's something to be said, and like it's 2 touchdowns a game is what you get from this guy. Right. I feel pretty comfortable. I mean, it's what you said. I mean, he's just an extension of Kyle Shanahan. That's his job security. He's what everything Kyle Shanahan has always wanted, which is him. He's somebody who channels him on the football field, and that's enough.
It is. Tua is a good one. I would call Tua a buy high. I'd write the buy low, sell high column at Football Guys that comes out on Thursdays. But more and more, Bob, I have been writing sell lows and buy highs. And I think those especially apply to week 2. Or another way to think about it also is just with week 1 under our belt now, picks that looked like values look like reaches, and picks that looked like reaches look like values now. And even a player like Tua Tagovailoa, where there's such elevated expectations after he had the best week he had since that incredible comeback against Baltimore, if you get in at current prices because everyone wants to see more, you might still get a big value. And I think Tua, well, again, that second data point is facing the New England defense
Which
that
is good.
frustrated Jalen Hurts. So
Right.
if he can do something like that, even remotely like that against New England,
Right.
wow, we're really talking. And just going back to the Tua performance really quickly, and Mike McDaniel. And just as an aside, I bring this up often, but I just think this is really funny. And I think it's how the universe is actually put together, how the world of people actually works out in practice, not the linear, logical way that we like to believe it does. Stephen Ross didn't even want Mike McDaniel or Tua.
Right.
He wanted Tom Brady and Sean Payton. This is against the owner's will. This is beautifully sprouting flowers and fruit. And you're seeing that you're getting Alec Ingold involved, and Durham Smythe, and River Craycraft, and Braxton Berrios.
The Braxton Berrios to you, Sigmund Bloom.
Yeah, and what's great about it, Bob, also, Chris Coffin pointed this out. His stuff, anytime he points out anything about the Dolphins, I sit up straight and really listen, that it's not just having Hill and Waddle on the field at the same time, because that was really how they put defenses on their heels last year. There were plenty of plays where only one of Hill and Waddle were on the field in this previous week against the Chargers, and they were making big gains, sometimes not throwing to Hill or Waddle, throwing to some of these other guys. That's really encouraging. That tells me, so sometimes I said something earlier this week that in the NFL, if you're standing still, you're getting passed. You can't just rely. This is where Greg Roman and the Ravens got into trouble, right? You can't just rely on what worked last year. Teams are going to catch up, and you have to be a step ahead. And that looked to me like a Miami Dolphins offense that is going to remain a step ahead. So yeah, Tua absolutely is a buy high.
I feel the same there. But just want to acknowledge right here and now, like week 1 is a liar, right? I said it to start the show, and I said it in context of the things that I wanted to happen that didn't happen. It's also possible for the things I wanted to happen that did happen, that maybe, like that was a super great performance by Tua. I do think this is indicative of things to come, but this is a tough game coming up in week 2. And the September volatility can carry through into week 2, into week 3. And before you get a little normalization, you start feeling comfortable with things. So I don't feel like comfortable going with the absolutes of anything, but I feel super comfortable with every share I have of Tua. I feel very comfortable of every share I have of Jacksonville passing attack pieces named Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley, of which I have many of them. And I think Zay Jones is going to end up. Mike Dempsey, my co-host on Sirius, has been hammering.
What's up, Mike?
He's been hammering the Zay Jones because this guy looks like a different guy this year. He's going to have a bigger role than people think. But I mean, we're going to have to come to grips with that offense with, somebody's going to be left on the outside looking in, more than one somebody every week. And it's probably not going to be Ridley. But those, these ascendant offenses, the Miami, the Jacksonvilles, they're going to, by the end of the season, you're going to be happy you invested in them.
Yeah, I think that where we can at least stick our neck out and say maybe week 1 is not a liar, Bob, is when we have a good reason of a why.
Yeah.
Right. And that's one of those ones. And then we test our hypothesis based on what happens in week 2. And then we revise our hypothesis. And we're still in testing mode. We're still using the scientific method to try to figure out what's actionable. Yeah. Well, we want something actionable. And of course, in fantasy football, the thing that leads to winning those belts is being willing to make decisions with incomplete information. And that's where we are right now. And we're trying to sort out players, whether we see staying power or whether we really, you could look at, say, I think the Giants offense is a good example of everything just went so poorly I'm not saying the Giants offense is going to take a step forward like we hoped, but also might not be that bad. And Arizona, whose defense is better than we expected,
They are
still
tough.
this is still one where the Giants should look better. Poor Zach Wilson, by the way. Weird. Of course they're saying they're confident in Zach Wilson because they don't want to sacrifice a quarterback like Joe Flacco to that Dallas defense in week 2. I guess since I brought it up, go ahead.
The offensive lines are concerns in both those instances that you're mentioning. I think the Giants as you look at these, and let's throw Pittsburgh into the mix too, right? Yeah. Are they as bad as it looked, or was the defense that they were playing as good as they looked? Probably it's neither. There was probably some happy medium in between there. But I do think I I have some hope for the Giants, and the hope lies in Brian Daboll being a really good coach and getting some things fixed. But the offensive line is definitely concerned there. And you mentioned Arizona. We all saw that cringy video and Jonathan Gannon. It just looked horrible. It made me think of the Mike Tomlin. We don't want hostages. We want volunteers. That looked like a room full of hostages. But that defense did not play like a room full of hostages. That defense played really aggressive and violently, and maybe in some cases too violently. But they're gonna have something for opponents, I think, at least, and so that's worth noting. But in the case of all these offenses, I don't want to go overboard. The Giants and Steelers, I feel like will get some regulation. The Jets now with the quarterback situation, I'm concerned. But look, we can talk about the running backs coming off ACLs this year are a different breed than the running backs, and it's just a good reminder that, every player is different. Like, the history does not support Breece Hall doing what Breece Hall did. It's the list of players who do that is limited to Adrian Peterson and Jamal Charles. Right. Okay. Now we're going to probably add Breece Hall, or at least it looks like we could, and maybe Javonte Williams as well, 2 in a single year. And Javonte Williams' injury was way worse. But there's some hope for the Jets in the form of Breece Hall, in the form of Garrett Wilson. And I know they're going, oh, but man, the guy that's throwing to him. Well, he cobbled together a damn good season last year with less than ideal quarterback situations. And it's possible that Zach Wilson goes from horrible to less than ideal.
Right. To functional.
Right.
Just functional.
To less than ideal. Right. Like,
exactly. Less than ideal is fine. Right. What's interesting about the Jets, and really quick, let's just talk like some good old breezy sports talk and not fantasy football meat and potatoes. Emotionally, Bob, or otherwise, just as somebody who's watched the game closely as long as you have, there's lots of seemingly hyperbole, but I do feel like, wow, this is kind of unprecedented for so much anticipation. Because it was just following the script, right? Yeah. Tom Brady wins the Super Bowl for the Bucs. Matthew Stafford wins the Super Bowl for the Rams. Now maybe it's Aaron Rodgers' turn because all the other pieces are in place. And sure enough, we did see, with the exception of the line, all the other pieces really are in place. Yeah. And I want to say before I turn the floor over to you to talk about this Aaron Rodgers injury. And wow, Aaron Rodgers, he likes his psychedelics, don't we all? And boy, his life is like a trip that he can't stop. He's not going to come down from, and it'll be interesting to see where it leads next with this happening. But I want to say just hats off to Robert Saleh, because you have to be an incredibly well-coached team. And I don't mean X's and O's. I mean the us against the world mentality. I mean the family. I mean this idea of like, we're on this journey together and nothing is going to derail us, even though the universe is going to conspire against us. Because that team went out and got a massive signature win against the Bills on a night that they should have had all the wind out of their sails. Certainly for most Jets fans, that was how it went. What was just experiencing that in real time, and any other thoughts you have on one of the most memorable, in a terrible way, injuries?
Yeah, just like such a feeling of disappointment. I don't even know if it was a letdown. Just like there was so much. So much of our time and energy was invested in this over the course of the offseason, right? And and when you put that in perspective of what the level of time, energy, and resources that the Jets themselves as a team put into this, right? And it just doesn't seem to be going so well. Aaron Rodgers clearly totally bought into the whole change of scenery, seemed to really be enjoying his time there. His teammates loves his Nathaniel Hackett, loved everything about it, right? And so it just seems like such a horrible way for that story to end. I mean, in general, that game though, they showed some things and they have some really good players. The Breece Hall thing, like I was super surprised by that. I don't think you paid Dalvin Cook top of the market money expecting him to come back and be the minimal piece of that timeshare. I think you paid him expecting him to be the primary piece, and it almost felt like Breece Hall got like a courtesy carry. Right here, have this, and then we're going to set you on the bench. And then he took that first carry,
right
down the field. And well, maybe another courtesy carry for you, young man. And so, he's taken advantage of his opportunity, and good for him. Zach Wilson now has a $36 million quarterback coach who seems to be invested in the situation. We'll see how he, comes back from this. Who knows? I mean, it seems like he's well-rounded enough, Aaron Rodgers, and has got himself in a place mentally where he can probably be very helpful to Zach Wilson. But I think the big news here, we're bearing the lead, is that we finally have a complimentary receiver for Stephon Diggs. Unfortunately, he's a Jets safety.
Jordan Whitehead. Yeah. Pitt Panther, I believe. So yeah, Breece Hall, I remember in my analysis after they signed Dalvin Cook saying, well, your hope if you want to take Breece Hall is that you're just betting on talent and that he's going to be so good that whatever plan they had for the backfield, they're just going to have to tear it up and say, how can we not let this guy be the centerpiece of our offense? And now that Aaron Rodgers is hurt, that goes double. Lots of 3 tight end sets coming in this offense.
And they need them.
Yeah, and that's fine because with this defense, you can win with that. I mean, that's the thing. Going back to Atlanta, we might not like it for fantasy football. It might not satisfy and fulfill our dreams for fantasy football, but for teams that are looking for wins, it absolutely can. And I think you're right to bring up the potential factor here that Aaron Rodgers, for the first time in his career, might be a mentor to the quarterback that's behind him, might become a quarterback coach.
But by all accounts, he's been that for Wilson since he got there. They have a relationship dating back before, Rodgers joined the team. So, and it seems like, he's put a lot of effort into, helping Zach Wilson move along. And so, look, I don't want to sugarcoat this. This is not good. This is not a great outcome. And again, the disappointment, and you could just see the stadium, the deflating of the fans.
Oh, I mean, I was watching the Yankees game and they were talking about it on the Yankees game.
So crushing. Why would you watch baseball? Say, what's the matter with you?
Oh, well, that's a larger topic. I mean, my original love in sports. Well, the first time that sports really, really turned me on, I think, was the NC State Wolfpack run in 1983. But originally, my aspirations in sports were to be the play-by-play announcer. Was aspirations the play-by-play announcer for the Pittsburgh Pirates. But that's that's for another show. And the thing about baseball, and it's, Bob, you should especially enjoy this as a sports talker, because baseball as a sport has so much empty space in it. There's room to talk about whatever. Like if you're an announcer, if you're on air for the baseball game, you have a good an hour and a half to talk about whatever you want. We could talk about, well, just like we will do here off the rails. But yeah, it was seismic feeling that. Okay. I do want to bring up one other potential why, and just take your temperature on this one, because we want to give credit to New England's defense. We want to give credit to Bill Belichick. Maybe we talk a little bit about the conditions, although those conditions did not really bother Mac Jones as much. Jalen Hurts, I mean, it's terrible for fantasy. Really, the quarterback, or everyone was talking about how bad early tight end was going into the week because of Kelsey and Andrews' injury. But early quarterback, I mean, you're looking at Patrick Mahomes without Travis Kelsey. He was the best quarterback out of the top 6 quarterbacks, and some of them were absolute disasters for fantasy. Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen certainly wasn't great for fantasy. And it was Justin Fields. It was rough out there if you took an early quarterback. On the Jalen Hurts front, if there is a potential why, other than, hey, New England's defense is good and the conditions weren't exactly perfect, the play caller, Shane Steichen, who we did see. So what makes me interested in this theory, Bob, is we did see, sure enough, Shane Steichen came up with an ideal game plan, like you said about Arthur Smith. What can you do? Okay, we're going to ask you to do those things, Anthony Richardson. And I think Anthony Richardson, you should be very excited about. If he hadn't gotten a little banged up, he might have been the number 1 fantasy quarterback of the week last week. On the other hand, with Jalen Hurts, you have Brian Johnson calling plays, not Shane Steichen. We're going to see this. We're going to turn around and see this tomorrow against Minnesota, a defense that made Baker Mayfield look like a plucky competitor instead of a retread.
I feel it. So I was all in on Baker Mayfield, one of my DFS tournament plays last week, just for the very reason the Vikings are horrible, and I think that's going to be a good thing for Brian Johnson and his play calling, and Jalen Hurts as well. Thinking of Steichen, by the way, is this is not his first rodeo, right? Or this is his not his second rodeo. This is his third. He did the same thing with Justin Herbert in Los Angeles. And the interesting thing about this is they took different approaches with the different players. Like Justin Herbert's first year, I think he threw more passes than anybody. Oh, right. Yeah. And then you get to Jalen Hurts and it's more run heavy. And so he's experienced all these, this broad range of how you bring these quarterbacks along. And I think that's going to work out really well for Anthony Richardson. But back to Brian Johnson, it might just be as simple as this was a lie, right? This was a 1 week lie that had something to do with Bill Belichick. Again, spending some time figuring out a way to do this, the weather conditions, etc. So I'm not buying into any more than I'm buying into Joe Burrow being as horrible as we saw against the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, I think that it's the math, right? If there's anything to take away from this show, thank you everybody for coming out and joining us live. Thank you everybody listening on the podcast. It's don't just blindly follow what my guess is or what Bob's guess is. Set up your brain for the transitive math that is going to emerge from week 2, because we'll continually adjust and tweak our interpretations of what happened in week 1. Because if it was just New England and the defense, then we should expect Miami's offense to take a big step back this week. And if we do see that Jalen Hurts and Brian Johnson are fine against Minnesota, Brian Flores' defense not exactly ready for prime time yet, and we also see that actually Miami's offense is fine. Miami's offense has another really good day. Maybe Tyreek Hill doesn't have a big day because Belichick's going to try to take him away, and they can just, as they showed the ability to do against the Chargers, we'll throw to Durham Smythe, we'll throw to River Craycraft and Braxton Berrios. Then we say, wow, Miami is really for real. So you can be watching a game between two teams this weekend and learn something about a team that's not playing in that game.
Yep.
That's the nature of this. I guess before we go off the rails, anything else that really jumped out at you in week 1 that people aren't talking about as much? There's so much that everyone's talking about. So really almost anything to qualify here with the floor here before we go off the rails. What's something else that's on your mind from week 1?
Some of the concerns, again, about quarterbacks being not as great. Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be perfectly fine for the Raiders. I think, Baker Mayfield might, I'm not expecting great from him. I just need him to carry the pieces that I am interested in. Right. I mentioned the Saints offense. I think, all those pieces that we hope for, it doesn't have to be 2019 Michael Thomas. It has to be just like last year's first 3 weeks of Michael Thomas.
Sure.
Hell, that might be more than enough. And so I guess just in general, I was kind of happy to see, maybe Russell Wilson showing a little bit, Sean Payton being in charge of an offense and maybe getting a little more out of it and cobbling up ways to get things going. I was not real happy with Tennessee's offense. Ryan Tannehill, I'm not sure if I want to put it all on him. But also, the usage of Tyjae Spears was interesting. I mean, did they go back to Derrick Henry heavier, based on the outcome of the first game, and given the matchup this week against the Chargers, you can run on them. So I loved everything about week 1. I mean, even the things I didn't like about week 1, I just love having football back, real football back that matters. Mm-hmm. And we can start again this process of figuring out where we're at and recalculating each week as we get more information. And the thing you said is totally true. I think back to the first year I played fantasy football in 1986, and halfway through the first week of the first game that I played of fantasy football, I looked up and I said, "We don't know enough to play this right." Yeah. That is still true, right? It's a process. That is an ongoing process of gathering that information and plugging it into your continuum of data that should go back all the way, not just through this preseason, but the past years. And you kind of build on that, realizing that everything is different and discrete in its own right, but it's all connected as well. And you can go back and look at a little bit of history and go back to what were coaches saying in May? What were they saying in June? What's happening now compared to what they were saying then? What's happening now compared to what they were saying in August? All these things come into the calculation. This is why I love fantasy football. It's such a complex mechanism, so many moving pieces and things that have to go right for everything to work out in your favor. And your ability to control all this is paying attention to all of it and trying to piece it together the best you can.
Yeah, being receptive, not arguing with reality, just learning from it. And Bob, I guess as we are old men of fantasy football now, it's kind of what you learn in life, that the older you are, the more you realize how much you don't know. And that can really inform you to make better decisions, understanding just how much you don't know. And it's why we love fantasy football, because we're so bad at it, because it keeps us coming back, right? I mean, and it's always adjusting, always a moving target. But if I can get one thing out of your last take there, I think it is some of these low-ranked fantasy quarterbacks. Nobody's taking Garoppolo. Nobody's taking Mayfield, not even Derek Carr. They can still support their wide receiver value.
That's what you need, right? That's all that matters. I don't care. They don't have to be frontline fantasy plays. They just have to fuel the fantasy fortunes of the players I'm invested in.
Yeah, I love the alliteration there. Okay, here's some more alliteration off the rails. Let's talk turtles. And we've talked turtles before, but I know, and I feel bad. I almost want to send you. Can you keep one inside? Can we send you one of the babies?
Bob, I could make room.
Yeah,
I got some planters in here that would work well.
And it's really like wonder and awe. And I just have to tell a story. So we've got boxed turtles here, Western boxed turtles. You also had Western boxed turtles when you lived in Albuquerque. You're just as tickled and thrilled by them. But the part that I wasn't ready for, because we weren't keeping them in enough space, I think, for the natural stuff to happen and babies to happen. But since we've got this giant turtle garden in our backyard that is like an elevated box for them, that's just for the turtles, we grow stuff in there, like stuff they can eat and stuff to give them shade. That indeed has allowed nature to work its way. Last year we had 5 babies, 3 made it through the winter. And this year now we have 4 new babies, and it really does get you all the way back. And one of the best things you can do in life, one of the best things for you folks, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, is to experience awe and experience wonder. And I do think another thing that happens, for myself, at least the older I've gotten, is you can see the divine. And I don't want to be blasphemous saying divine. I'm just using that word as a reference to like things larger than us, things that we don't totally understand. It's really everywhere if you just still yourself and it emerges. But boy, you see the wonder of life. Because I remember when I was a kid, one of our cats, at one point, Bob, this is my mom, rest in peace, Mom. We had 13 dogs and 7 cats and other animals too in the house. And I remember one time the cat had kittens in my sister's bed. But I never got to see anything like that. So seeing that these little turtles crawl up out of the dirt, like little fully miniaturized turtles, and they don't parent them, Bob.
No,
they don't.
They're just on their own from the get-go.
But I know you were enchanted by this too.
Right.
Let's just riff on this new life in turtles thing.
So little baby turtles are the most amazing thing. They're the size of quarters. They bite super hard. Which was the alarming thing. So the whole fascination with turtles, and by the way, my cat heard the animal talk and has now wandered over to the desk to say, what's going on here? No, this is Wally, the smaller one. Ming's up at the top of the stairway.
Wally, the one who rules the block, right?
Yeah, it's Wally who rules the block, and it rules it here as well. Ming, the merciless, is up at the top of the stairwell staring at me right now. But yeah, the turtles are like these, it's like a little herd of dinosaurs, right? I mean, and I know it sounds stupid, but it's just, they seem so ancient. They seem prehistoric. And they're storming around in Albuquerque when I had a bunch of them. They're storming around the backyard, just doing their business, doing what they do. And I found it endlessly fascinating. I could watch them.
Yes.
Like more than I watch TV. I found them way more interesting than almost everything on my television box. And I spent a lot of time doing that. And when you get the little ones, it's just like this feeling of elation going, look at what's happened here. They're like even tinier.
I was running around the yard.
Right.
We got one. Last year when I discovered them, we got another one. We got one. Like everyone in the neighborhood knew. It is elation. That's a beautiful
and then
way
you
to
start, but then you start worrying about them. And you try to keep track of them.
You
Turtles, by the way, are very elusive. Right.
Yes.
I mean, they come out when they want to come out. And, I mean, kind of they get habits like if you feed them, there are certain times or there are certain things like mine became addicted to wet cat food.
Oh
And
yeah.
if they heard my door, the
Mm-hmm.
sliding door open, they would show up, right? Or if I started tapping on a can, they would show up, and they knew it was coming.
Mm-hmm.
That even looked more dinosaurish than feasting on a hunk of cat food.
Right.
Or catch them eating a lizard. You're going, oh my god, they are dinosaurs. Look at this. It's horrible, but I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, well, and a lot of things you said resonate with me too, because absolutely you have a massive respect for them because they've survived extinction
Right.
events. You know, they've been around for a long time in this form. They have figured out something that works much longer than anything we've figured out. And they just know how to survive. They know how to survive through just about anything. And absolutely, you study their behavior and you study even the individual personalities.
Right.
I can
They
often
have
tell
them.
our tall tale. Oh, they absolutely do. Because we have I call him Papa Smurf too, Prince, the patriarch. He's the one that the first day he escaped from a chicken coop that the other four couldn't figure out how to escape from. We still don't know how he escaped from it. We found him. He was chewed up by a dog. It looked like he was no way going to survive. And he even escaped when the neighbor found him from the little pet carrier that the neighbor put him in. And then my wife, Kate Love My Life, did an incredible job nursing Prince back to health, including honey. You know, the honey is what they use as the disinfectant.
Yes.
That's what you use to keep
It's
infections from
antibacterial.
forming. Antibacterial honey. See, all the secrets are right out there in plain view, Bob. It's not, there's no secrets to the universe. It's all
Honey
there.
never goes bad.
It never goes bad. That's right. This is incredible. And you watch their individual behavior. You see, like I'm seeing, like, you know, Prince, the patriarch, because we have our two girls that we named just randomly, like Giles and Bowie, and he used to scare them and chase them around. But now when the food comes out, they chase him away. So he's getting a little meeker now. It seems like maybe in his older age, the girls are saying, no, we rule the roost. But I like to say, too, you mentioned wet cat food. So we get incredible produce down here in Louisiana. And there was a cantaloupe season earlier. And I'd like to say, you want to watch a turtle race? Just put some cantaloupe down.
Right.
And you'll never believe how fast these turtles can move. But I think, you know, again, bringing this back to the point that I want to share with everybody, is just whatever it is that makes you feel a sense of wonder or awe, or something that reminds you of just how big and amazing the world is, and how this is just wondrous to get to be a human being, just to get to be so there's Wally. Yeah. And I mean, we could go talk about our cats too. I know we've ripped about cats on this show too in the last 10 minutes, but it really is, you know, and especially now, because I think life, it just, the screws are turning tighter. A lot of people are, you know, there's more struggle. That's what fantasy football is here too, at least as like a relief, but also just life and the wonder of life, gardening too, absolutely watching plants grow and seeing how all the things that they can do. I don't know if we've talked about this, Bob. There was this article, what do plants say about us? And it's about plant consciousness. And plant consciousness is something I think that if you just watch a little closer, it happens slower, but there's some amazing things. So yeah, I mean, outside of watching football, and then there's the breathtaking plays of football, right? There's Zay Jones' one-handed catch.
Ooh.
There's Bijan Robinson making 3 guys miss. You know, there's Garrett Wilson saying we're still going to win even though Aaron Rodgers got hurt. All of these moments, all of these awe-inspiring moments, and then and of course Wally and Ming and all these wonderful things. So it's a great thing to get to share this with everybody. And you know, Bob, if you want a baby, you know you're first on the list. So you just let us know.
I appreciate that. I'm going to find room and make it so. I need to build a box in the backyard.
We honestly, you were the first person when I saw the price. I gotta tell Bob. I gotta tell Bob. It's so exciting, and they are little tiny dinosaurs. And I hope whatever the tiny dinosaurs are in other folks' lives, everyone listening, everyone here live, that you can find that. And otherwise, just as we've been telling you for the last hour, stay receptive. It's just 1 week. It can be a lie. Be ready to react. That's the most important thing, not whether you're 1-0 or 0-1 or whether you made the right picks, and that you're listening to this show and watching this show and being part of the community, you know, Football Diehard on Twitter and, you know, Football Guys. So folks, we appreciate everything you do to support us, to keep us, allowing us. I always say we're getting away with it for another year, Bob.
Yes,
and
sir.
it's a joy, it's a pleasure, it's a privilege to serve you all, because you are so very classy.